I am recording this session. Like all other sessions, they will be posted to our website by the end of business on Friday, along with the things that we are going to be giving away at the end, which are marketing campaigns and a few other items that are very specific and pertinent to the webinars that we're doing. So in this case, we have a few other items along with the marketing material that we're going to give you to help you sell security services and solutions to your existing clients or your prospects. Today's webinar is all about backups versus business continuity. And unfortunately, most people think of business continuity as backups or disaster recovery as business continuity or backups as a disaster recovery, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's where everybody goes wrong. And because of that, those who sell business continuity solutions make much higher margins, are immensely more successful in market. And frankly, in the MSP side of my life, I would love to go up against somebody who presents themselves as a business continuity solution when what they're doing is selling either backups or disaster recovery appliances and devices. Today's agenda, it looks like a short agenda. We're going to get through this pretty quickly today because the topic of business continuity, while a very big topic writ large, we speak to various elements of business continuity across all of our selling security services. So for instance, our very first webinar on risk assessments is an element of business continuity as it first defines the risk landscape and what you must protect and defend against, as well as develop a business continuity solution for. And so because of that, every element of the Selling Security series is a component of or speaks to a business continuity solution. So I'm not going to dive into the individual elements because the other ones will do that, but you'll see we'll be touching on that lightly. We're going to talk about backups, disaster recoveries, and how they relate to business continuity, costs of downtime, and other elements. Like every single one of these webinars, I always start with, I want you to think bigger. Think beyond the four corners of what being an MSP means. Because I want you to think about being an MSSP and selling solutions, not products. Regrettably, MSPs get stuck in this whole concept of selling a product. Oh, we've got the best antivirus. Oh, we've got the best backup or backup appliance or backup software or backup solution when it's really not a solution at all. And when you sell product, you create the concept of commodity in your own mind and in that of the mind of your prospect or client. And so as we go through this, I want you to think bigger. Don't think selling product, think selling solutions. Because ultimately, if you are an MSSP, you are a managed security solutions provider. And so because solutions sell, solutions have a different set of outcomes. Products are a defined solution, yes, I use that word again, but for a very narrow and specific objective and task. A solution provider thinks about all of the elements of the landscape and how do we build a solution suite of products and services that are cohesively joined together so we can deliver for our clients and prospect something better, something different, something more, something that satisfies and satiates their need. As a quick reminder, at the bottom of your screen, you can ask any questions you want. We're going to take those up at the end. Colin's on the call with us. He'll read any question you put in there. There's two places you can do that. There's a Q&A section at the bottom. You can click that, or you can click the chat button. He's monitoring both of those, and I'll answer all of those questions at the end of the webinar. Let's start with backups. Unfortunately, backups consume about 89% of all of the backup disaster recovery business continuity applications out there. Applications mean those that are being used by businesses today. They tend to be file and folder based, and 92% of that 89% are online. So they're either online only or they're local and online, predominantly online, because businesses and some MSPs think Carbonite is a backup solution. And with all due respect to Carbonite, it is not. For a variety of reasons, some of which we will get into in a little while, some of which are way more technical and much too technical for a webinar like this. A traditional backup solution like a Carbonite or like a some people use Dropbox, yes, or like perhaps something that you're getting from a vendor out there like eFolder, take generally about 47 minutes on average to restore a file or folder. It's not necessarily because internet speeds and other things are slow. It's because by the time you find the one that the individual lost, deleted, corrupted, whatever, and you're able to restore it down, that's how much time it's taking you to solve their problem in terms of a file or folder restoration. And if a whole machine is wiped out and all you've been doing is a file folder backup for them using one of those products, it takes 7 days to get to a full system restore. Because you have to order equipment, install operating systems, install software, then do the file recovery, make sure that if you have some files and folders that are integrated with line of business applications, you're working with line of business vendors to get those incorporated back into the system. And so it generally takes 7 days to get a full restore back from a file and folder backup solution that you may have employed. And so really, as you heard me use the word solution again, it's not really a solution. It's a product that brings about an outcome that may or may not be acceptable. But to me, 7 days is unacceptable. 47 minutes is unacceptable. And if you're delivering business continuity solutions, those are anathema to business continuity solutions. Anathema meaning this is nothing that would comport to a business continuity solution, because business continuity by definition means the business is able to continue. And so to go 7 days before you can get a full restore, you are not having a business continuity solution. Generally, nobody talks about recovery point objectives, RPO and RTO. These are acronyms you should know, and you should know them intimately. And if you don't, you're going to learn all about them on this webinar. And they will become part of your vernacular, part of the words that you will use every day when you talk about business continuity. Because recovery point objectives and recovery time objectives directly speak to business continuity and disaster recovery. And a recovery point objective says, what is the maximum amount of data I'm willing to lose? That's what the business owner is going to tell you. And so that is the most recent point in time to which you're able to restore data. That's the recovery point objective. So the nearer the objective, the more frequently you have to back up. What I mean by that, if somebody wants to lose 0 data, you have to have continual backups. If they're willing to lose a day's data, you can back up nightly. If they're willing to lose a week's data, you can back up weekly, and so on and so on and so on. So recovery point objective is absolutely germane when putting together a business continuity solution, as is recovery time objective. Recovery time objective is how long it takes to get back up and running, back in business. And remember, backups on average take 7 days for a full system restore, 47 minutes for a file and folder. All too often, people who sell backup solutions are not giving any consideration to continuity relative to a recovery time objective. And that's why it is never a consideration at all. And they tend to be leading with product and therefore selling a commodity. and therefore selling on price. And the moment you're selling on price and selling a commodity, that every prospect, every client can compare you to anybody else out there. And that drives cost pressures and price pressures until margins go hyper thin and you're not making money. So you want to get away from the concept of driving by price and selling commodities like backups. Because ultimately, backups are not disaster recovery plans. Backups simply do exactly what they say they're going to do. They grab a piece of data and they store it somewhere, hopefully online as well, on-prem and online, because you want to get to it quickly. It's on-prem is a much faster solution. Online protects you from a premise disaster, fire, flood, etc. And online will protect you from that. So you want some element of both online at the very least. But backups are not disaster recovery plans. Backup disaster and recovery appliances and devices, or otherwise known as image backups. The term backup disaster recovery appliance sounds better, but ultimately it's just an image backup. An appliance that will store images of systems and put them locally and or online. So there are applications out there that will store them just online. Most of the time you'll have some sort of appliance that will do that on site as well, so you can spin something up in the event of disaster, which is why you've got disaster recovery times down to 4 hours as opposed to 7 days, so to speak. 4 hours in terms of being up and running. Full system restores 4 days. So there's still, to get a full system back up and running on its feet, brand new iron takes about 4 days. Because all you need to do is get the iron in-house, and then you can do something called a BMR, a bare metal restore. And so that generally takes 4 days to get a replacement appliance in-house. And then when it gets there early enough, in the same day, you can do a BMR on that. But that notwithstanding, I don't want to overtalk the technical. You are much faster in terms of your ability to recover files, folders, disaster recovery, full-bore bare metal restores are certainly much faster than what you would get from a normal backups solution relative to files and folders. Recovery point objectives become a consideration now. And what I mean by that is, because you have some sort of image-based backup and you're able to do a time-based backup, meaning you can do incrementals every 5 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes out, whatever it is, you can speak to this concept of recovery point and recovery time objectives to help sell that particular product or service. And also because you're having a better conversation about backup relative to recovery point and recovery time objective. So you're starting to speak to the business's need of continuity, but you're really not addressing continuity writ large. Because you're selling a product, a service that you may be labeling a solution. A backup and disaster recovery appliance is a disaster recovery solution. But again, to the extent that it's a disaster recovery appliance, it is a commodity and it is easily replicable by competitors, and they can compare you price to price. Because the reality is, none of your competitors are going to go up into your prospect's face and say, we suck less than them. Everybody says my solution's the best. And whether you use Unitrends or Datto or Veeam or whatever, it doesn't particularly matter. No one's going to say that theirs sucks less. Theirs is always the best. And to the consumer of these products, which are the businesses, the prospects that you're leaning into, your existing clients that they're trying to take away from you, they know no difference. You're the trusted advisor. They're another IT person. They know you, so they trust you if they're a client, so that trust hurdle's already been overcome. But if you have a minor slip up, that trust has already been diminished in your existing client's eyes. It's an opportune time for a competitor to walk through the door who's sending them a bad date letter or an aspirin campaign, and they pick up the phone and they talk to your competitor because the trust factor has been diminished a little bit. And again, they're going to say they've got the best solution. They're going to have testimonials too. And so selling on product is still selling a commodity, even when it comes down to backup and disaster recovery. Because no one's going to say theirs is not a good product. And so you're ultimately going to be driven by price. And you're still speaking to the wrong person in the company. When you speak about products like backups or backup and disaster recovery, appliances and services/solutions, they're going to say, why are you any different and why do you cost more? Because again, it's a commoditized component of an overall business continuity strategy. And so BDR, backup and disaster recovery, is not a business continuity plan. A business continuity plan is completely different. It is far more reaching than backup or even BDR appliances and those services and solutions that you wrap around them. Business continuity speaks to the business writ large, every element of the business and how you're ensuring that they are up and running all of the time. There is a core focus on backups and recovery time and recovery point objectives, but you're not speaking to them relative to the appliances you're employing. You're speaking to them relative to the business need you're solving. And the solution that's under the hood, the appliance or software you're using under the hood, isn't relevant in that regard. So what is business continuity? Well, business continuity is the point at which preparation, everything you've done leading up to that moment, meets disaster. And so what you see on the screen are all the various elements and components of either prep or disaster. And that Venn diagram, where they meet, is business continuity. You are bringing to them a solution that ensures that when disaster strikes, you've got it. And you need to do all of these things inside this preparation. That's why I said, while your backup and or BDR products are a component of, a core component, in fact, of business continuity, selling business continuity is not selling backup. Selling business continuity is not selling a BDR. Selling business continuity is about making sure their business is up and running all of the time, or at least as much as they're willing to suffer. Because there is a price element for absolute real-time business continuity. So there is a price pressure on that, but you can bleed that out of them vis-a-vis things like risk assessments, business impact analysis. These are things that we have either done webinars on or are doing webinars on that speak to how you're going to build the solution that's ultimately going to solve the problem of continuity relative to their risk tolerances. Risk tolerances meaning how much are they willing to lose or be down or whatever. And so business continuity, as you can see, is not backup and disaster recovery, because it takes into account all elements of the organization. And how do we solve for that? So if you think about business continuity from a bigger scope, we're talking about disaster recovery, business impact analysis, BDR, DRAS. Again, this is a core component because it speaks to also recovery point and recovery time objectives. Managing that entire process. We call it disaster recovery as a service. because a lot of business continuity, a significant majority of business continuity, is around the ultimate backup and restoration process and products and solutions that you provide beneath them. But that's not what you're leading with. The product I use is irrelevant. It's what is it going to do for you and how am I going to solve the continuity problem that is germane? Because you're speaking to risk, not cost. I never talk about the product because the product doesn't matter. How am I addressing business risk? Because the risk to the business and their appetite to loss directly speaks to the cost. Cost becomes irrelevant if going out of business is not an option relative to threat, right? So you'll find even the cheapest business is going to be willing to spend, if they believe there's a real threat of going out of business. So, you need to do your part in educating them. A hurdle to overcome, but that's done through drip marketing. It's done through webinars. It's done through seminars, which many of you do. I know a lot of you on this call today. And so I know you're out there doing it today. So you're already going through the education process. The marketing efforts you do are an education process. You're breaking down the barriers of trust, and you're bringing up the levels of education through the marketing efforts. And so you're leading with risk, and you're not leading with cost. You're leading with loss, not product. You're leading with business impact versus singular outcome. I can get your data back in 4 hours. Who cares? Because ultimately, if I can keep you up and running, isn't that a better answer? I can keep you up and running. Yeah, but he can get my data back in 4 hours. Yeah, but if I'm keeping you running, 4 hours is too long. It's a lifetime. And so business opportunity is leading with risk. Did not change. Okay. And if you remember back in our first webinar on risk assessments, some of you on this call, I know, were on that one. Some of you are new to it. Just so you know, all of our webinars are up on our website. This one, too, will be up on our website by end of business on Friday, along with the collateral that we're giving away. That notwithstanding, this is already up there, and I encourage you to go back and look at it. But the reason why I bring this slide back is because the C-suite owns risk. I don't say that and they don't, as if they don't know it and look at it, I'm giving you an epiphany. They know it. A survey done by Deloitte and Touche shows it. 70% said we own it. 29% have formed advisory teams to measure, monitor, and inform the C-suite as to the risk posture of the organization. That's nearly 100% of all CEOs surveyed say we own risk. That is our core responsibility in the C-suite, is to measure and manage risk. So think about that for a minute. When you're selling to clients and prospects and you're selling a BDR, A, you're leading with product. B, they have something to compare you on price to. But C, you're more often than not talking to somebody who's dealing with a P&L item. An item like, is this going to hurt my budget? Am I going to spend too much in this area versus another area? When you're dealing with the C-suite, they don't think about the cost of a particular item. They think about the cost to their business. And the product under the hood isn't really a cost to their, or it's a negligible cost to their business. Let me rephrase that. The real cost to their business is risk. What happens in the event of a disaster? What happens to the business, our reputation, our clients, and every other stakeholder if, God forbid, we have a disaster? We do a lot of posting on social media, and as you may or may not have seen, there was recently an exposure by a medical facility in the Midwest. And those people didn't think that they had a significant business risk. And so as a result, they didn't bother. It was a ransomware attack. They didn't bother to pay the ransom fee of, I believe it was somewhere in the $6,000+ range. So they opted not to pay it. They're going out of business. They filed for bankruptcy, and they are shuttering their doors the end of this month. Go and look it up. I believe it was somewhere in Michigan. I believe it's also out on it's either on my blog or it's also on our Facebook page. But they're going out of business because to them, again, smaller business, they didn't think that there was a risk to it. Part of what you're doing is educating your prospects and clients today through your marketing, et cetera, what risk looks like and what it means to them. And you need to solve the risk problem that they're experiencing. They own it, they know it. You're not talking to a cost center. You're solving something that they own. So when you're measuring risk, when you're thinking about business continuity and how to mitigate the risk, because that's what business continuity solutions are all about, mitigating the risk of outages, downtime, not being able to conduct business continually, hence business continuity. You need to do disaster planning and impact analysis. So if you look at what they mean, right? So you have to first define what possible disasters there are. Now they are obvious. There's nothing particularly subtle about them. You've got physical and natural disasters. You have intentional and unintentional disasters. A variety of disasters, no matter which way no matter which shape or form they take, they tend to fall in the same typical categories, right? Man-made disasters, natural disasters, the unintentional ones like ransomware and phishing and things like that come in. People who delete accidentally, move files and folders, get rid of files and folders, servers crashes, machines crash, line of business applications go sideways. Malicious intent, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Those are the disasters. They're all out there. You all know them, by the way. It's why you're selling backup and disaster recovery products today. It's because you know what those are. So we don't really need to talk about what they are. What you do need to do is start to think about whose responsibility area within the organization they are, and you do something called a business impact analysis. And what a business impact analysis is all about is, if this is the risk, A, what's the duration, the potential duration or time that we're going to be impacted because of that type of risk? What is the operational impact? How does it affect operations? And that gets done on a department by department basis. What's it going to cost us? Not what's it going to cost us to fix, what's it going to cost the business if we get this kind of an exposure? So if we get hit with ransomware and we're crushed for 2 weeks, like it was in Tallahassee. Tallahassee just had they just had a hacker redirect direct deposit funds. Anyway, so they're down for 2 weeks. I just can't remember. Also, it's out there on our Facebook page if you want to take a look. Point being that what is the financial impact? What's the business impact as well? How is it affecting the stakeholders? Think about for a moment what that means. Stakeholders are everybody who touches the organization. Employees, C-suite, boards of directors and advisors, customers, vendors, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the business impact looks at how it affects the stakeholders. And so when you're doing an impact analysis, you're looking at each one of these opportunities of risk and saying, okay, how is it going to, which areas of the company is it going to affect, and what are the outcomes going to look like, God forbid we have it. It also includes the probability, by the way. What's the probability of something like this is going to happen? And what you're seeing here, these are screenshots of disaster recovery planning and business impact analysis that we have on our PII Guard website. So as our CyberGuard partners know, they have access to that. And these are all available today for existing partners. And then business continuity recovery management. So we talk about both of those things because ultimately it's business continuity is about how do you make sure that you recover from any one of these attacks, the risks that are being presented to you. And so we talk about it as an underlying solution. There's this concept of disaster recovery as a service. A core key component of that are backup and disaster recovery solutions like Unitrends and Datto and Veeam, et cetera, as well as the other services that you wrap around that. They're spoken to in the business continuity plan that gets developed, right? So you've identified the risk, you've done a business impact analysis for the company, and you've developed a set of processes, procedures, product, solutions all together that say this is how we're going to mitigate risk through something called a business continuity plan. And it speaks to this recovery time objective and recovery point objective. These are the things that you're going to see as a result of a business impact analysis. That the business impact analysis is going to measure the risk appetite on a per risk or per attack basis relative to what the company is willing to endure. Because again, if you're looking at this risk to this area has this potential outcome operationally, financially, and to our stakeholders, on a scale of 1 to 10, how important is that to me? And the higher the level of importance, the lower level of tolerance they have relative to downtime, and therefore the higher level of business continuity they need. And do you see the conversation that I'm having right now with the CEO? This is not about a BDR appliance or a backup solution. It's about a risk mitigation strategy. How do we prevent you from being exposed to these risks by ensuring that your business operates continually relative to how much you're willing to lose? Because that's what a risk analysis is all about. That's what an impact analysis is all about. So when you consider that concept, you're looking to make sure that you've got all of these things in place such that they're operational, and then you test. I can't say testing enough. So many times, including some of you on this call, you put together a solution that the vendor has told you is great. But all too often, you don't go back and check. You're too busy running forward. And testing is a key to ensuring that a business continuity solution is effective and that you're bringing forth a solution that actually solves the continuity problem. Because again, if you're selling products, chances are you are not going to go through the efforts of testing. And we believe in vigorous testing. We believe you have to do automated testing, so make sure you're choosing products of your solution suite that provide for automation of the underlying backups that are happening. Then manual intervention too. You need to develop processes and procedures, of which we have some in our PII Guard portal, of what your routine is going to be, yours behind the scenes without the client, of ensuring that what you're backing up is in fact good, verified by you, not the underlying software. And so we recommend those happen monthly, that you do that at a file and folder level. You do test restores and you do test compares, as well as a BMR or a VMR, a bare metal restore or a virtual metal restore. So you're going to do a test restore of a backup. These aren't small efforts. I know what you're thinking, but I'm going to get to the point in a moment. And then the other manual piece is, we call this a fire drill, and you're actually going to bring your clients into this process. And you're going to do a fire drill. So remember school? We're going to do a fire drill. We're going to pretend we're on fire. Let's everybody practice, practice, practice. That's what this is all about. You want to make sure that you and the client know what it looks like when a disaster happens and what you're doing to solve the continuity problem. We recommend you do one at least quarterly on a departmental basis, because on a company-wide basis, it's a bigger effort and usually happens on the weekend. But on a departmental basis, what if the finance systems go down? Great, we're going to test that. What if the warehouse goes down? Great, we're going to test that. And you're bringing the customer into it. There's a whole series of things you want to make sure you do. Happy to discuss that offline. Have some of those in our portal as well. And then on an annual basis, you want to do an entire company drill. What happens if the building blows up? God forbid. What happens if everything crashes? And so you want to do a company-wide on an annual basis. Now, these are big lifts. Several things are happening at the same time, all happening at different levels in your company and in your clients' companies. The first thing that's happening that presents itself is you're going to be busy as hell. I don't deny that. And you think you're going to be imposing on your client. You're not. You're instilling trust that says they really do have our back. They really do care that we're always up and running. It matters to them that our data is good and our processes are functional. They care about our stakeholders as much as we do. That's what these fire drills tell your client. They are absolutely necessary, but they are also a sales tool. And so you're going to want to run these manual fire drills on a quarterly, on a departmental level. And so one quarter you'll do finance, one quarter you'll do operations, one quarter you'll do warehouse, and you want to do an annual fire drill company-wide. So backups, we started talking earlier, backups, disaster recovery, business continuity. Backups are nothing but a tool, and they're a tool of a disaster recovery plan, right? And so a disaster recovery plan includes these various products. A lot of people just lead with backups. We talked about that. They're products. They can do comparatives of price against you and your competitors. They can go out and buy their own. Think about selling hardware for a moment. How many times do your customers go onto the Dell or the Lenovo site and say, oh, it's this much money? And they do that with every single product you lead with. Trust me on this. Because backups aren't a solution. They're a tool. Disaster recovery plan just utilizes an element like a backup to put together, okay, this is how we're going to recover if your server crashes. But disaster recovery itself is merely a tool for risk mitigation. And I can make this case all day long. Again, I could probably walk into any one of your clients and ask them what you do about business continuity. More likely than not, and it's not because I know who you are, it's because this is the typical MSP and frankly, the typical MSSP. They lead with product. And so their idea of a disaster recovery plan is, well, I can spin up a VM on the BDR appliance in about an hour, and by the time we do all the networking, we're 2 to 3 hours into it, and you're back up and running. And that's a disaster recovery plan. But ultimately, that's just one tool in the overall risk mitigation strategy. And that's what a business continuity plan is. It is a risk mitigation strategy. And the difference between the two, when you're selling backup or disaster recovery, you're selling a commodity. And they are going to go out there and compare you to everyone else because everybody else sells those. They cannot compare risk mitigation strategies because everybody's going to do it a little bit differently. Even everybody on this call, if you all just drank my Kool-Aid right now and you went and employed some risk mitigation strategy, whatever it looked like, it's going to be different for each one of you because you know what you're capable of, you know what your vendors look like, you know how you're able to execute, and everybody will execute differently. But ultimately, if you can get yourselves around this concept of risk mitigation, you're no longer selling commodities. You're no longer selling products. You're selling strategic differences that speak to the C-suite. They're not looking at how much is it going to cost to my bottom line. They're looking at how much is not doing this going to cost my bottom line relative to business impact. How are my stakeholders going to be hurt? And again, I come back to the fact, yes, it's a duplicate slide. Yes, I talked about it in risk assessments. They know they own risk. This is not a function of cost. It is a function of risk mitigation, which is a core responsibility for nearly 100% of all CEOs surveyed. They know they own it, and they know they must do something about it, because they also know that if they don't, something will happen, and eventually they're going to lose to their competition who are doing it. And so when you think business continuity, it's really part of this larger cybersecurity solution, right? This is the preparation and mitigation components of it. To some degree, a defensive posture, but realistically, it's the preparation, risk analysis, risk assessments, impact analysis, etc. Preparing for this, building the product suite that are incorporated into the solution. Product suite you don't lead with, the solution is what you lead with, and the mitigation strategy. So when we talk cybersecurity, we always talk about business continuity. Because from a cyber perspective, that is where the threats are. And our ability to protect our clients against the cyber risk is predicated on our ability to defend and mitigate. And since the largest threat to any organization is cyber, this is an intimate component of a cybersecurity solution. Again, managed security solutions provider, not managed security services provider. Lead with solutions. 4-part plan to developing a business continuity plan. First and foremost, defining the business impact. We talked about that earlier. So you're going to define what risk looks like, what are the risks, and then how does it impact the organization. So this looks like a big lift, but let me pause for a moment. Think what happens when you sell a new MSP client. The first thing you do is you do a network audit. If you're not, you should, by the way. But the first thing you're doing is doing a network audit. You're taking some sort of assessment of what the network looks like, so you know what you're getting into. That's all a business impact analysis is. You're doing an audit of risk, which may sound difficult, but once you get your arms around this, it will be as easy for you in a short period of time as a network audit is. I'm not saying network audits are easy, but we're used to them. We know them, and it's easy to do what you know. And so first and foremost, you're going to take an assessment of risk and the impact on the business. Then you're going to outline the various risk mitigation strategies. You're going to do this internally. How are you going to satisfy the risk that are exposed to the company and their appetite to accept it? Because that's what an impact analysis says. It says, these are the risks, these are the impacts. How do you rate this, Mr. CEO, Mrs. CEO? And so the higher the rating, the more important you need. Your overall strategy, your continuity plan has to be, these high things are must-haves. Don't worry about cost now, because that doesn't matter just yet. Remember, the higher the level of risk and or the lower the level of tolerance, the less price matters. Then you're going to provide a DRAS solution, a disaster recovery as a service solution. You need to add these elements of the backup and disaster recovery and the mechanisms of restoration, etc., into your solution suite. And then you produce, monitor, and manage the business continuity plan. Notice that I don't have in this deliverable, I don't have a product. I'm delivering a BCP, a business continuity plan, a solution for ensuring continuity. It has nothing to do with product. It has to do with risk mitigation. So we're going to take questions in just a moment. What we're giving you is going to be available on our website at the end of business on Friday, maybe sooner. I'll find out from Colin, but he'll let everybody know. You're going to get an email on that. We're going to put up there a disaster recovery planning template that you can use. So you saw what that looked like in one of the screens. We're also going to be putting up there a business impact analysis worksheet that you can use as you go out to your prospects or client and you begin to take their risk appetite temperature and give them some visibility into what it means on the operational, financial, and stakeholder level if a disaster happens, whatever that risk is. So the likelihood of ransomware, if it happens in this area, is going to affect operations by X, cost Y relative to their service or product delivery to their stakeholders. How are their stakeholders are impacted? The business impact, do they have reputation risk? Do they have other financial risk, etc.? And then what is their appetite for that risk? Is that a serious appetite that they don't mind that at all, or they have a very low tolerance? They cannot deal with. And so that business impact analysis worksheet is going to give you the opportunity to work through that. The marketing plans all around that, and these are just some of the products and solutions that CyberGuard 360 offers. And with that, I'll leave my contact information up there. I'll take any questions. Colin, anything out there that I can answer?
We have 4 questions come in. The first 2, I think you answered pretty well throughout, but I'll still raise them anyway. First one, what is an impact analysis, and is it part of a risk assessment?
Oh, okay, that's a really good question. So I think I answered the impact analysis, but let me spend 30 seconds on that. So the impact analysis, you basically take what are the risks to that organization. You're going to look at some technological risks. You're also going to look at some non-technological risks, because part of it you're going to look at is what are they doing inside the company procedurally, and how is that potentially a risk? So if you think about how employees use their technology is a risk. What kind of spam filtering they have is a risk. So there's elements to this that are absolutely technical. And then there are other elements to this that you look at what the overall competitive landscape looks like to help them solve for. And then you define what its impact looks like on an operational level, what departments it affects, what people it affects, and how it affects them in what way relative to time. Are they going to be down? How much time are we going to be down for? Maybe the risk has no time factor and it doesn't impact anybody. Then how much is the financial exposure of that impact? Not financial exposure as in what's it going to cost them to repair. Financial exposure is there's time value of money, right? So how much is it going to cost them while they're not putting their money to work? Their employees are sitting around idle, their products aren't going out the door, they're not delivering services to clients or their potential prospects, they're not fulfilling orders, whatever. How does it affect their stakeholders? There's another element of that. And then how much are they willing to tolerate that, those levels? So that's what an impact analysis, and it definitely relates to risk assessments, but it is not a risk assessment by any measure. A risk assessment helps to define the risk profile of the organization. It looks at 3 high-level areas, and I'm going to be quick on this because we have an entire webinar on risk assessments on our website. But it looks at the entire organization, administrative, physical, and technical. And it says, what does the company look like, and is there risk in what that looks like? Go back and look at that webinar. I went through that in detail. Happy to also take a call on that. Hope that answered the question.
All right, the next question, which again you had touched on throughout the webinar. My number one sales objection is price. That's why I sell backups and get trapped in break-fix situations. How do I overcome that?
So you're getting trapped in price conversations because you're having a discussion on product and price. And I'm going to be honest about this. You cannot do that. If you're talking product, you are going to talk price. That's just going to happen. And I never discuss product. I discuss risk and outcome. The question isn't, well, how much it's going to cost. The question is, okay, before I answer that question for you, Mr. CEO, tell me how much it's worth to you to not be able to send out invoicing. Or how much is it going to cost you to have your employees sitting around doing nothing? A law firm gets hit with a ransomware attack. What's their average billable hour? Because the average ransomware attack is going to have them down for a minimum of 3 days. 3 days times the average billable hour per attorney and or the entire organization, because you got support staff, times the number of people in the organization, times the number of hours they're down. And that's the cost of not having a solution. And so the question to me isn't how much does it cost? The question for you is how much are you willing to lose? Now that sounds a little Pollyannish and it doesn't work. I can tell you absolutely without equivocation it works every time, because they have to be reflective of what they're willing to lose. And if they're willing to lose it all, use Carbonite for God's sakes. But those are the kind of clients, if really they're going to give you some answer like, well, it doesn't matter, I can afford to lose everything, that's a nonsense answer. They're not really your clients. No disrespect, but if they can't understand the value of risk, there's no way you're going to be able to help them.
All right, the third question of 4. I have HIPAA clients who won't even back up. If I can't convince them, even though it's part of the law, how can I sell DR solutions?
Okay, so again, you're not going to sell DR, you're going to sell risk mitigation. You're selling business continuity, not disaster recovery. I know the problem with HIPAA well. We are intimately familiar with HIPAA and most of the other regs that require some degrees of protection, compliance, et cetera. So we're intimately familiar with that. The problem with HIPAA is HIPAA has no teeth, and to the extent that no physician thinks that an auditor is going to walk through the door and find them, they're never going to comply. That is typically the problem with regs and laws like HIPAA. So let's leave that off the table for a moment, because to me they're not the same animal. Right? If you're talking to them about compliance to a regulation that they're never going to be obligated to comply with, what do they care about compliance? And I mean that sincerely. Because you're going in there and saying, well, by law, HIPAA says, they could give a damn less about that law, because they know the regulators are not going to come and fine them. The only time that will ever happen is, God forbid, someone files a complaint with Health and Human Services, and then the likelihood of that instigating an audit, which approaches 0, by the way. So leaning into a compliance regulation that has no teeth is literally tilting at windmills. So you want to steer away from that conversation in any regulation without teeth. And you want to come back to the discussion on business continuity. How long could I give you the practice in the Midwest? Again, I believe it was Michigan. They ignored the threat, thought they could take care of it. They're going out of business the end of the month. And if you sell into the medical community, I would print that and add that to every single prospect that you lead into to try to sell. You are not selling a compliance solution for them because they don't think that that's important. They don't think there's any teeth to the reg. You're selling a continuity solution that prevents them from going out of business, as was evidenced in the Detroit medical practice. And so you're selling a continuity solution, not a DR product. So hopefully that helped.
All right, and final question, and thank you everyone who put in these questions. What kind of oversight is needed to monitor backups, and can a SIEM help me with that?
Yes, and sometimes. Even though the first question it wasn't a yes. So the way we would do it is you've got a backup solution component that says, okay, I'm going to do routine backups. We're going to get screenshot verifications, which, by the way, that is no verification. So if you're living and dying by screenshot verification, you're definitely not doing your company or your clients any kind of service whatsoever. So we recommend regular testing, as I said on an earlier slide, at least. So let me go back to that slide for a second. I know I have it in here somewhere. Bear with me. So if you look here, an automated daily monthly. Now, I have a screenshot of a product called Unitrends. We happen to sell Unitrends appliances in the channel, so happy to talk to you about that. But forget about that for a minute. Unitrends has something called recovery assurance. If you look at that top right quadrant, basically what recovery assurance is, and Datto started doing this last year, in the early part of last year, so I want to be fair to Datto as well. Unitrends has been doing this for more than a decade, and their library of scripts are much deeper. Point getting is this recovery assurance actually runs PowerShell scripts against a nightly booted test VM to test that what's actually what's supposed to be running is running. So for instance, we use it to test that Exchange servers databases have been mounted. We use it to test that Active Directory structures are stable. We use it to test that this data inside of a SQL database is current. And that's done on an automated basis and reports out the success or failure of those recovery assurance jobs. So if you get the right appliance, you can automate the stuff that you're going to do on a daily basis, but at least on a monthly basis, you want to do test restores. And so you want to do a set aside. Now, I don't know how many clients you have, but on a monthly basis, you're going to want to allocate time to do test restores and verify that what you're backing up is good. It doesn't have to take a long time, but you do need to do it. And then finally, you want to run fire drills. So I think this answers the question, hopefully, that it answers the question. The last part of that was SIM. Do SIMs monitor BDRs? They do to a degree. So our SIM, Cyberglass, monitors Unitrends appliances. However, other SIMs may, because they'll monitor, A, if they're application aware, and or B, they'll monitor the SNMP traps. And so as long as some of that's collected in there, not all are, that's why I said maybe. Okay, any other questions out there?
That is it.
All right. Well, I certainly do appreciate everybody attending. If you have any questions, my contact information is up there. This webinar is going to be made available on our website, as I indicated, by the end of the day on Friday, along with all of the collateral that you saw that we are giving to you guys. You can see there at the top part, disaster recovery planning, et cetera, et cetera. So also, Colin will send out an email to everybody. Again, any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I appreciate you all attending and look forward to seeing you next time.